Hi, guys. This is Carlin Liborio with TeachingRLA with Carlin Liborio. I am super excited to share with you what I have been learning with TEA and with WestEd. I just went through a training last week and the week before on Zoom, and I learned so much. And I just really want to share it with you guys so that you can use this in your classrooms when you are teaching. So I took some notes that I wanted to quickly share with you. And then after I go over the notes, I am going to show you the anchor sets that they showed us. And I'm going to go ahead and show you those. If this video takes too long, then I might separate it into different parts. So this video is going to mainly be my notes. So the biggest mistakes that we saw in student responses were that students often copied the evidence, but they would not put quotes and then they did not explain the evidence. So it was basically just, it might have a central idea, it might have answered the question, but then it just copied evidence without any type of explanation and not necessarily connected to the central idea. Another common mistake was students that were writing summaries. So they just summarize or paraphrase with no explanation. So that made me realize that I would like to teach a lesson to my students that really differentiates between what is a summary and what is paraphrasing, and just reminding them that an ECR is not a summary. Um, really encouraging your students to give original writing versus copied writing. Um, being really careful that they're not just copying from the passage and not explaining anything. And quality over quantity. It's not about the length. They could have a one sentence introduction, a one sentence conclusion. They could have a multi sentence introduction and a multi sentence conclusion. Either way, what they're looking for is, when you read the language in the rubric, is it all connected? Does it answer the question? Does it show a thorough understanding? And they're looking for quality writing over quantity. So if they can do that in a shorter response, that might be possible. Um, but it's not like they're not giving it, that it has to be a certain length. We did talk about, types of prompts. The informational prompt is, they did say, is more like a literary analysis. For example, they might ask a question where they are asking about a relationship among characters or how they evolved or changed as a result of an event. And you've probably seen on TEA's website, they have already released several prompts that use this type of language. Um, that's just one example. Reflection and some voice is good. We did see several student responses that as teachers, we were in these educator committees and we all noted, wow, this one really has some voice to it. So I'm not saying that that's necessary to get a 5, but if they add in some reflection and some originality and some authentic writing, that is always a good thing to teach our students to do. We did also talk about if it's supposed to be a first draft or if it's supposed to be a final copy. And basically, they said that it is a happy medium between a raw first draft and a perfectly polished final copy. So they are expecting that the student is going back and checking their writing before moving on. And, so it's kind of in between a first draft and perfectly polished, somewhere in the middle. Uh, they do grade each response based on the grade level expectations. So that's going to be different from third grade to seventh grade and up. So they're looking at the grade level expectations as far as organization, depth, and it's going to get more complex the higher you go. We also talked about rate of errors to number of sentences. So this is something that you can share with your students, that if they write a very short response, let's say they only write one or two sentences. And even if they answer the question and have some evidence, and even if they try to explain it, but it's very short, um, and they're trying to grade it on conventions, keep in mind that if there's only one sentence and it has 2 to 3 errors, whether it's spelling, punctuation, capitals, um, they look at the rate of errors to the number of sentences. So that 2 to 3 errors, but it's only in one sentence, that might be a 0 for conventions, or it might be a 1 for conventions. It's not gonna be a 2, which is the total possible points for conventions, because maybe it's just too short and there's not enough there to really say that the student has a consistent command of grade level conventions. So I thought that made sense. One of the first questions we ask when we're scoring a paper is the central idea evident? It has to answer the question in order to get a point, and it has to be logically connected throughout the whole essay with evidence. And another thing we talked about in our groups and TA clarified is that the central idea should not be implied. It should be clearly stated. So you shouldn't be saying things like, I think the student was trying to say this, or I think the student meant this. It has to be really clearly stated, and you have to take off your teacher hat and the way that you would maybe grade a paper, and you have to put on your scorer hat. So when you're grading it as a scorer, you're really looking at the rubric, and I'm going to show you how they actually go through and ask those questions going straight through the rubric to, and with each point, in order to say that it does not have a central idea, you have to give proof. So it's almost like the scorer is giving proof why it is that score. And that's what you see when you read the scoring guides. And that's basically what we learned how to do, was how to write those. And so that's probably where I learned the most, because we learned how to take the language from the rubric, how to put it in a specific order, and how to really analyze the essays to give proof. Does it have a central idea? Does it have, and I'll go through those in a minute. Um, and another big thing that we saw was insufficient or vague evidence. So anchor papers are key. If you don't know what an anchor paper is, it is amazing. Anchor papers are basically what the scores rely on, along with the rubric, in order to score all the papers. So anchor papers have the full range of possible answers, more than the scoring guide even. And the other thing that I don't know if you're aware of, but this was also eye-opening, is just the importance of range finding. So range finding is when they have groups of educators along with TEA, and they basically sit in a room and they discuss the low twos, the medium twos, the high twos, and they all have to agree in order to come up with these ranges. And that is just, so important, because if not everybody can agree on it, then they wouldn't use that as an anchor paper, or as range finding. So an anchor paper, when you see something and you say, oh, this has been decided by TA, it's an anchor paper. And if you ever volunteer, well, it's not volunteer, but if you ever apply to be paid as a scorer, you will go through this training, and the anchor papers are key, and that is what they use to train the scorers. So it's really interesting, and those were specifically chosen because everyone agreed that it was that score. And not only did they all agree, they all justified it using evidence from the student response and the language of the rubric. Okay. So speaking of language of the rubric, that brings me in to the TEA slideshow, which is coming up. So one of our first days of training, they showed us anchor papers. And I'm going to show you that same slideshow. And basically, when scorers are training, and if you become a scorer, you would go through this anchor training where they would show you 4 different student responses per score point. So they would show you 4 zeros, 4 ones, 4 twos, 4 threes, 4 fours, and 4 fives. And then they would give you a practice set, which is 3 sets of 10, and you would score those. And on that, you have to get an 8 out of 10. And if not, you have to be retrained. And so it's a whole process. And then after they do the practice sets, they have to then do a qualification set in order to be a scorer. They also throw in pre-scored embedded essays to kind of catch if someone is not scoring correctly. So I didn't realize that it was that much of a process. So it seems like they are trying to think of different ways to make it fair. If an essay is 2 points or more apart, like let's say two people score it and one person gives it a 5 and another person gives it a 3. What they would do is they then give it to the supervisor to resolve. And sometimes it gets put back in the pool and rescored by 2 completely different people. So it's really interesting to hear the whole process. And these are some links I'm going to put in the description after I show you some of the anchors. Please check out my Facebook page, my YouTube channel, and my TPT store for more information. I also have an email list, and you're welcome to email me if you have any questions. So this was the TEA slideshow that they showed us. And it kind of goes over a lot of, some of the things that I told you. So I'm just going to go through this. So the first prompt we read, it was a 5th grade prompt that I'm going to show you the anchor set. And so this 5th grade question was read the story Drawers and Secrets and explain how the relationship between Elliot and his grandmother before he opens her drawer compares to their relationship after this event. Write a well-organized informational composition that uses specific evidence. Okay, so kind of looks like the same type of format. So this one, they really had to compare and contrast before he opened the drawer to after he opened the drawer. So this is the language that I wanted to show you where the first thing you ask, and it's in order of the rubric, is that does it have a central idea? If you are in grades 3 through 5, they call it a central idea. And then as you get older into other grades, 7th or 8th grade, they call it a controlling idea. And then in high school, I don't know if it's 8th grade or 9th grade and up, they call it a thesis. So, but basically it's the same thing. So they look, is that central idea identifiable? And the next thing they look at is the organization. Does it have a structure? Does it have an intro and conclusion? And what type of structure does it have? Is it connected? And then they look at the evidence. Is the evidence specific, well chosen, and relevant? I did want to point out that it does say here that if it's a paired passage in grades 3 through 5, evidence is drawn from at least one text. So what that means is it could be a question on a double passage asking them to write about both, but they will still get a 3, which is the highest possible score if they have evidence drawn from at least one of the texts. If they are in 6 and up, they have to have that evidence from both passages. So that is worded in the rubric. And the last bullet point is the expression of ideas is clear and effective. And so this has to do with word choice and teaching your students to not put vague words like stuff, getting them to put those specific words that really enhance the response and are effectively crafted, and basically that they contribute to the overall quality of the response and the clarity of the message. This is what they look at if it's a 2. So it would be, most of these ideas. a 1, and then a 0. So let's look at the 0 for a minute. A central idea may be evident. So a 0, it might have a central idea or it might not, but the response lacks an introduction and conclusion. It does not really have an organizational structure. The evidence is either not there or it is irrelevant. The response reflects a lack of understanding. So that one would be lack of understanding. It could also be that it's incoherent or unclear. So, and if it gets a 0, then it gets a 0 total, even with conventions. So this one, I want to point out that it has um, lack of understanding. A 1, you'll notice it says limited. Where does it say? I'm trying to find it. So this one says lack of understanding, and this one, it's under evidence. This one says the response reflects a limited understanding. And then a 2, the response reflects partial understanding, and that's what they would always end the rationale when you look at the scoring guide, it ends with that statement. It starts with central idea, and they always state the central idea in the student's writing, and then it ends with that one. And then a 3, it'll say reflects a thorough understanding of the writing purpose. Okay, so then conventions, you can either get a 0, 1, or 2. So a 2 means the student demonstrated consistent command of grade level conventions, and that can include all of the above: sentence construction, punctuation. They look at capitals, they look at spelling. They don't just look at one thing. So the response has few errors, but those errors do not impact the clarity. So that's how it can get the highest possible score for conventions, if it doesn't impact the clarity and it's a consistent command. A 1 is an inconsistent command, several errors, but the reader can understand the writer's thoughts. And then a 0, little to no command. The response has many errors and the errors impact the clarity. Okay, so here's the anchor set. And it says, designed to exemplify the rubric score point descriptions agreed upon by an educator committee, further define the range that exists within each score point, and it's the backbone of scoring. Okay, so this one is a 0. Elliot is very happy spending time with his grandmother. He imagined her grandma playing baseball. He loved her house. The walls were laden with sentimental keepsakes, and there was her baseball glove. Next to it was the bat, she to score the winning home run in the championship game. So I know you haven't read the passage, but and this is 5th grade, so keep that in mind. But basically, the student did not answer the question. So they were supposed to say, how did Elliot feel about his grandmother before he opened the drawer? And then after he opened the drawer, how did their relationship change? So none of that is really in this essay. So it says central idea is not evident. So pay attention to these bullets and how it goes in order of the rubric. The central idea is not evident. The response does not address a change in the relationship, and it does not even mention the drawer. No introduction or conclusion. Organizational structure is not evident. Expression of ideas is ineffective. Most of the response is a paraphrase of the details, and then it gives examples. Response reflects a lack of understanding. And then it got a 0 for conventions because it was a 0. So it does have some random, pieces of evidence that are copied, but none of it is really explained and it doesn't even answer the question. So that's why it's a 0. And then this is a 1. Before Elliot opened the drawer, the relationship was fine. Elliot cherished going to his grandmother's house, but that stayed the same. But after he opened the drawer, he saw his grandmother had things like a painting, ice skating, shoes, a typewriter. He thought about his hobby and how he was the captain of 5th grade history club. He realized everyone loves different hobbies, even if they're known for one thing. Elliot's grandmother saw from a different point of view. Elliot learned she loved different hobbies. So that one got a 1. It got a 1 for organization, and it got a 0 for conventions. So they said it had an insufficient. So it doesn't say it doesn't have a central idea. It doesn't say central idea is not present. It says insufficient central idea. No introduction or conclusion. Some evidence of the compare and contrast. Limited paraphrase support is insufficiently explained. Writer does not identify why Elliot cherished going to his grandmother's house. Realized everyone loves different hobbies, even if they're known for one thing. And so it has a lot of that vague language. And when you're conferencing, this is why you have to always be asking them why. Why does it show that? How does it show that? So the expression of ideas is ineffective with a single run-on sentence, and it reflects a limited understanding. So notice there's only one period. And it does not just talk about the huge run on, it also says capitalization and it gives an example. It talks about not using commas and sentence structure. So it's really not just one, error. It's a whole bunch of errors, which is why I got a 0 for conventions. This one got a 2. And these were the reasons. And I'm not going to read all these. I'm just going to go through them. And if you want to pause the video and read it, you can do that. This one got a 3. This one has a little bit of structure to it. So it does mention that it does have an introduction and conclusion. It does have a central idea. It has paraphrase support, but it's vaguely worded and insufficiently explained. Imprecise word choice, partial understanding. So 2 out of 3 for organization and a 1 out of 2 for conventions. So that got a 3 out of 5. Okay, anchor 4. This one got a 4. And it got a 2 out of 3 for organization and a 2 for conventions. So the conventions look great, great for 5th grade. And it got the highest possible points for that. And when you read these comments, you should be able to tell why it didn't get a 3 for organization. So it says here, it says it does have a central idea in the first sentence. That's really important. It has a minimal introduction and a final statement that serves as a conclusion. Compare and contrast organizational structure supports the central idea. Sentence to sentence transitions are also important. And development of central ideas minimal but clear with effectively crafted sentences. Partial understanding. So, okay, this one got a 5. Yes, it is a lot longer. Yes, it is written in paragraphs, but that's not why it got a 5. It got a 5 because it has the central idea. And it's interesting how the central idea is in the 3rd paragraph. So it doesn't have to necessarily be in the first sentence as long as it's in there somewhere. Introduction and conclusion are evident. Compare and contrast structure with paragraphs focus on the before and after. Central idea is thoroughly developed with well-chosen and well-explained evidence. Expression of ideas is effective. Word choice is specific, and it gives examples of those. And it has a thorough understanding. So I recommend you read this one and you pause the video and read this because you're going to really notice the language and how it really does a great job of explaining. And you could even share these with your students. Okay, and then they gave us the practice set, which that was fun because it doesn't show you the score and you have to all discuss it as a group. And that was interesting to see, if you agree and then they tell you what score it got. But I'm going to stop the video here because we are already pretty long. But I do want to let you know that I will share this slideshow and I will be sending this out to the people on my email list. So if you're on that, you will get this. And that way you can use it to help your district to understand all of this. So I hope this video helped you, and I will be making another video, but this is just, I know a lot of people were waiting for this, so I wanted to get it out. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a great night. Thanks.